Okay, all right. A lot of people who use them for weathering, but they can also be used for shading and highlighting as well. Whether you're talking about something on a figure, you're talking about something like a car interior, whatever the case may be, there are a lot of things that you can use pastels for. And the good thing about using pastels is that you really do get a lot of control with it. Okay, it's been called a poor man's airbrush because you can get kind of the same kind of effect that you can get with an airbrush, but you actually do have a lot more control because you can put the pastels exactly where you want them. Okay, so a few tools that you'll need if you're going to use pastels. First of all, flat lacquer. If you're using acrylics, whenever you're going to be, I always, whenever I'm working on a figure or anything like that, whenever I get something that I like with acrylics, I always seal it with a lacquer coat. So that way, if something goes wrong, I can take a wet Q-tip or something, wipe it away, and it doesn't affect what's underneath. So it's just nice having that extra barrier in between. Okay, you need various kinds of pastels. There are a couple different that I use. I like these little generals because these are basically flesh colored ones. They come in a set of 4, and these work really well for flesh colors. I like using those. You can also just use any of these that you can get from like Hobby Lobby. These are like the Master Touch. If you have the option, always go with the one that says soft pastels. They're a little easier to work with. And then what I really like the best are these pan pastels because they're already ground up for you and they're very easy to use. The majority of what I did on this figure is a combination of these with the pan pastels, and also for grayscale figures you can get, if you're doing something in grayscale, and I'll show you something on that here in just a second. You can also get a grayscale set as well. If you guys have seen, hopefully, the new IPMS Journal, I had an article, pretty excited about that, of this figure that I did in grayscale. And the reason why I brought this, if you haven't really looked at it close, I had it here at the last meeting, but if you haven't looked at the figure really close, a lot of variations that I did in the flesh here, this is supposed to be a vampire character, so she's very pale, but if you look real close in this picture, you can see a lot of variations in the shadows of the gray, and you can also see variations of light and dark in the shirt as well. The vast majority of those variations I did using this pastel set. Okay, it gives you a lot of control. You can put it exactly where you want it, and it works out really well. The other thing that you need that will really help is this is kneadable art eraser, so that you can take this, and if you go too far, you go in a place you don't want it to go, or you don't like what you're doing, you can always use this to just get rid of it. What's really nice is that you can just take this and knead it into a point, and then you can wipe away whatever you don't want. So let's say you're doing a figure that has a very pronounced vein on its head or something. You can take a little bluish pastel, put over that vein, and if it goes too far, you can just take your point and go around it and get rid of everything so that you have just the pastel on where that vein is. Okay. So you can go about this a couple of different ways. I use a few different types of brushes. I like using, for a lot of things, these soft round ones. They work really well a couple of different ways. You can use these with the soft pastels. If you want to go really light, you can actually just take the brush and just rub it across like this on the pastels. That's why you want the soft pastels. So you can just rub it across here, and then that will give you just a little light. You can see just a little bit of light stuff on the paper towel here. It's very light, but that's what you want a lot of times. You just want a very light shading. You can always add more, but it's sometimes, just like with paint, you can always add more, but it's harder to take it away. Now, the good thing with pastels is you can't just wipe it away with a wet Q-tip. That's the reason why you want to seal it with lacquer. Okay, so if you're going to go this route, that's really good. Now, if you have a harder pastel like this one, you're going to have to take something like some 600 grit sandpaper and kind of grind it down. You can use that, which is great. You might want a little harder brush. Now, the thing you have to be careful of, I like to use these Micromark dry brushes. But the thing you have to be careful of, you can see this is kind of ground down because every time that you get this off of here, you're rubbing your brush against the sandpaper. So be aware that you're going to have to replace these every 3 to 4 years, give or take. Okay? But these are really good stiff brushes that will really give you a very good highlight exactly where you want it. So to demonstrate here, I've got this. This is an extra head from a kit that I bought of Barnabas Collins. It came with 2 heads. So this one is just kind of a quick. I didn't really do a whole lot of stuff with the flesh here, but you can see that there's not a ton of variations here. So I'm going to take a little bit of this light pastel, and I'm going to run it over where his brow is here, and just kind of hit these high points, and along the nose, along the cheeks. Just doing a real quick and dirty thing here for this. And you start to see some of these highlights in some of the places I'll hit his chin too. You can see they're starting to pop out a little bit. Okay, that's just a real quick, easy thing. You can also, the other thing you can do is you can take your darker pastels. If you didn't want to use a wash, you can take your darker pastels and really get into those grooves, like the little in his brow and everything, and then go back and use your kneadable eraser and run across there so you get everything except what's in the recess. Okay, and so that works really well. The other thing about pastels that's great is that you can actually blend them. Okay, so it's just like with paint, you can blend them. So I can take these 2 colors here that I just, this light one that I had and then this darker one, and if I want something in between here, I just take my brush and kind of run them together like this, and I end up with a shade kind of in between. And you, just like with paint, you know, if you want it darker, add more of the dark. If you want it lighter, add more of the light. And so now I can take this and start going into some of the places like into the little crease around his cheek, and go into some of these other places and just try to get underneath his eyebrows. And again, if you hit a place that you don't like, just take your kneadable eraser, go over it, and it will pull up everything. Okay. Now, what I really like are these pan pastels, as I said. What's really great about these is that they are already ground up, so you don't have to do a whole lot of work. You can see with this figure, a lot of the shading that I did on the skin. I've got a lot of reddish hues in there. I'll talk just a little bit about using different colors besides just flesh color here in just a second. The vast majority of that, a little bit of that came from the fact that I used some red primer. Some of the primer is showing through in some places, and that was intentional. But I also, to beef that up, used some of this dark sienna shade in order to give her a reddish, more lifelike appearance. Okay. Now, the general rule for doing figures, if you're trying to get a very lifelike effect, you want to use warmer colors. You want to use browns, of course, because that's going to blend in with your skin tones. You can also use greens and reds, okay, and that will give a little bit more interest, a little bit more lifelike quality than just doing everything with flesh tones, okay? You can also use blues, even though it's a cool color, but because, you know, a lot of times the veins have a bluish texture to them, then that works out well. And then if you want to do something like if you're trying to do a zombie or you're trying to do a vampire or something like that, or something more monstrous, you would want to go using something more like different grays. You would want to use, like if you remember that, Dracula's Daughter that I did that's been doing very well in contests, I did all the shading using Payne's Gray to give her a little bit more of an undead look. I also added some purples in there as well, okay, which helps give that sort of vampire look, okay? So just to give an example here, like let's say this is a vampire figure, so let's say I want to add some gray to it. I just take one of these brushes, since this is already ground up, and these are going to be very, very, very strong, so you want to be careful. And see, I can just put into these shadow areas here a little bit, and it starts blending a little very well because these are like using transparent paints. Okay, and now you start getting just a little more variation to the flesh, and you start seeing a little bit more, starting to look a little bit more like you're doing something other than just a regular hue. Okay, and again, if you don't like it, let's say, oh, I went a little too far into the highlight. go back over it with your eraser, and you can get rid of anything you don't like. Okay, and it works really great. So the good thing about this is that unlike paint, once you seal this with the lacquer, you can experiment. And anytime you don't like anything, take a wet Q-tip, go over it, pull it off, and you can start all over again. Okay, so you can keep doing it, keep doing it. So, with paint, you can't really do that. But you can do that with pastels. You can just keep doing it. Now, the last thing is when you get done, you're going to have to clear coat it, and that gets to be tricky. Okay? When you clear coat it, the thing that you have to be careful of is that if you get it too heavy, then you're going to make the pastels wet and they're going to start running off. Okay? So that's the tricky thing that you have to do. So what you really need to do, I'm not going to actually do it, but what you really need to do is just give it a quick, like a and no more than that. Okay? And what I actually do is as I'm doing it, I kind of move, because what you want is you just want a really fine mist to go over this so that it locks everything in.
Just kind of fog it a little bit.
Yeah, just kind of fog it a little bit. Just spritz it is all you want to do. Okay. If I can stand over here, I'll show you. But if I wanted to lock in the pastel here, and no more than that. If I do any more than that, you can start making pastels. And once that sets for a little bit and dries, then you can do some more. Okay? And you want to be careful. Now the other thing is that like with these pan pastels, there's a little bit of smell. I thought you guys would be used to that.
That's where the creativity comes.
That's right.
Who goes well so
That's right.
Rolling right in your face.
Exactly. With these pan pastels, they're pretty heavy. The pigment is pretty heavy. It's going to be really hard to wash these off. But if you're using more of these kind of Hobby Lobby-ish pastels, then you have to be a little bit more careful. Okay, it depends on the amount of pigment and how much you're using. But you can really get a lot of control with what you're doing with it. The other really great thing that you can do is, like for instance on this figure, all of the places where the flesh is touching something else, then I took the pastel and just went around. So like around her hair, I took some darker pastel to kind of mask where the painting line is. I did that around where it touches her shirt. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to go back and do it here, so it'll kind of blend that a little bit. And it helps blend those lines between where the darker areas and lighter areas are. You can use like a nice burnt umber. If you remember the Barnabas Collins kit that I did, I was having a little bit of trouble blending where his neck met the shirt. I took a little bit of burnt umber pastel and ran it around the neck, and it was perfect. It blended in with the flesh. It looked like a shadow and made a nice little line right where the shirt meets that area. So pastels also help to blend those kind of areas as well. So if you haven't used them, I really recommend you do it. Like I said, it can be time consuming just doing the pastels on her flesh. I probably spent 4 to 5 hours just going over different places, clear coating it, go back and do more. But you want to do this a little bit at a time, because like I said, it really is a lot better to just go, oh, I need a little more. I need a little more than it is to keep going. Oh, I've gone too far, let me get rid of that. Okay, so a little bit at a time is really the best thing to help. But if you do go too far, unlike paint, you can always use your your kneadable eraser, or if worse comes to worse, wet Q-tip, just wipe it away. And then once you do that, you're good to go. That's pretty much it. Anybody have any questions?
How much do the pastels typically run on the pan versus the box?
Okay, something like this, I think is, well, it's got a price on it right here. This is $5.99 at Hobby Lobby. You use your 40% off coupon. That's not going to be too bad. This one was also $4.96 for those little flesh ones, but they're worth it. Again, you get your 40%. These Darryl sells, you can either buy them in a pack or you can buy them individually. This one is priced at $6.29 for one thing, but this is going to last forever. Unlike paint, it's not going to dry out, so you don't have to worry about that. But these are definitely worth it. You can also buy them in sets, and you get a little bit of a break when you buy them in a set of 6 or something like that. These that are all stacked up here, I actually got in our silent auction for $15. So I was very happy to get these. And I wanted to get the other set as well, but John beat me out on that. He,
We'll probably get some more of this next year from
Yeah.
Pastel. We got a whole bunch of stuff from
Right.
them last year.
well, John got the other set. We had 2 sets of these, and John from John's Models got the other set. And then when we went to Chicago show, he was selling it for like $45.
Yeah, so he bought them to resell them.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
John.
So,
You ever use
Yeah.
a hobby knife to get your powders?
no, I haven't.
Yeah. Just go up down the side on a napkin and get a lot of things. You need it a lot.
Yeah, that might be a good idea, and then that way you don't have to go over.
Yeah.
You don't have to go over sandpaper.
Put your napkin down and
That's a good idea. Yeah, I like that.
Also,
I
if you need it, lots of it.
also, you can actually take your pastel stick and draw the highlights. Go to the highlight points and then rub it in.
Yeah.
I did that for my Frankenstein where he needed some veining. I just took purples, blues, and greens and just scribbled all over it, and then gently blended it all in to start looking like veins. It took a while. Just keep spraying and building it up. It looks great.
You should bring that. Let's look at it.
Frankenstein?
Yeah.
Want to see it?
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I've got.
I got one question.
Yeah.
Oil pastels or chalk pastels?
I believe these are all chalk.
If there's a difference between the two.
Yeah. Oils are a little different. They were a little.
Oils-
I'd stick with the chalk.
Yeah, oils are complicated. You have to really, really be patient.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. But, you know, I really have, you know, when I paint in particular flesh, but you can also use this for clothing as well. But for flesh in particular, you know, when you paint a figure and you take it to a show, what you do with the flesh and what you do with the eyes is 90% of what they're really going to look at. I mean, really and truly. And, you know, because it doesn't matter what you do with the clothing, if the flesh that you do doesn't look realistic, you're going to get dinged on it. It's going to happen. And I use generally about 4 or 5 different flesh colors when I'm painting something like that. So I do get a lot of variations already, but I still like to go in and fine tune with the pastels. And it really does give you a lot of control. You can put everything exactly where you want it. It works better than trying to brush everything on because it gives you a really nice smooth finish. And it really can make a huge difference in how your flesh tones look. So, but you can do the same thing with clothing as well. Yes, sir.
You mentioned put a little bit of pastel on and then mist it.
Yeah.
Let it dry and put a little bit more on.
Yeah.
Why do you layer that on top of different black layers?
Okay. I wouldn't necessarily do. You don't have to do a little bit and then seal it and then a little bit more. With pastels, you can keep working with them because you can always wipe it away. But what I always recommend with anything, whether I'm doing car seats or whether I'm doing something on a spaceship or whether I'm doing something with a figure, whatever, as soon as I get something I like when I'm using acrylics or pastels, as soon as I get something that I like that I want to keep that exactly like that, I want to add stuff to it, but I don't want to mess that up. I'll always seal it, okay? So here's a perfect example of this, okay? When I was painting this around her flesh here, okay, when I got the flesh looking like I wanted, I sealed it really good, okay? So now I'm painting around it with a very thinned out black, trying to get that line. Well, if my hand's not steady and I accidentally go a little too far, quickly get a wet Q-tip and wipe it away, okay? Because the water or your airbrush, or you can use an airbrush thinner or whatever, is not going to affect that lacquer because the lacquer is not water soluble. Right, so the lacquer and anything that's underneath it cannot be washed away, all right, unless you didn't seal it good, okay. And or unless you've got a bad primer, and I've had that happen too. But anytime you get something that you're like, I'm happy with that, seal it before you start adding the next stuff, because then, like particularly, let's say you're adding a bunch of pastels to your paint. If you haven't sealed it and you don't like something, and you take a wet Q-tip and start rubbing it off, you might start rubbing off your paint, then you got to start all over again. But if you seal it real good with lacquer before you start putting your pastels on, then you can wipe away anything, do whatever you want, and it's not going to affect what's underneath that lacquer.
Is that one done mostly with the pastels or is it paint off?
It's a combination of both. There's a lot of pastels. So I spent, let's see, Josh, where's Josh?
Right here.
How long did I spend working on, you were there, how long did I spend working on just painting the flesh tones?
Oh man, it was good. About 2.5, 3 hours.
2.5, 3 hours just airbrushing on the flesh tones. And then I probably spent another 4 to 5 hours doing different levels of pastels. something like that. So. Now, when you do a girl kit, there's a lot of skin. This is my first girl kit, and maybe my last for a while. So, but yeah, usually this isn't as bad as some of the ones that Tom used to do. You guys remember Tom?
Looking down our glass.
Ones Tom used to do, there was a lot of
Put
stuff.
it this way.
Don't look, Cliff. Gosh, come on. Any other questions?
Keep it down low.
Thank you, Brent. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Brent.